Today we're going to address one of the largest crime sprees ever committed by the United States government, the Federal Reserve and their member banks, and the state of Texas with other states. We're going to address the massive the pile of road apples that the Department of Justice and the FBI, with the Texas State Attorney General and many other state attorney generals, just how corrupt they really are. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand that developing and constructing and marketing and financing subdivision developments is not done in a vacuum. Building subdivisions and marketing them to the public using bank loans and large financial packages from FDIC insured banks, federally insured lending institutions that are members of the Federal Reserve System. These things are all regulated. They can't just do it any old which way they want to. Down in Texas, the entire state is operating one of the largest criminal enterprises in U.S. history. And this is how it works. They ignore all the laws and allowed millions of consumers to get suckered in illegal land developments. I'll say that again. The state of Texas, most all of the county commissioners and county judges, along with the FBI and the Department of Justice, with many other federal law enforcement agencies, allowed millions of people to get criminally swindled in land development schemes that were completely illegal. Now, out in Arizona, they're called wildcat or paper land developments. California recognizes them as unrecorded. What do they call wildcat land developments? And up in Utah, they're called recreational dirt road subdivisions. Desert recreational dirt road subdivisions. Down in the Houston area of Texas, they're known as unrecorded, red flag, illegal, unrecorded land developments. These stories have been printed many, many times in such crooked newspapers, just totally crooked newspapers, as the Houston Chronicle. Now, this is where I'm going with this whole thing. You see, during the 1900s, the early 1900s, 19-teens, the 1920s, massive real estate speculation and massive real estate frauds brought about the collapse of the savings and loan and banking system in the 1920s, early 1930s, and it was determined that massive, unrecorded, red flag, unpermitted, unsanctioned wildcat paper land developments were at the heart of the collapse of the banking system in the 1920s, early 1930s, resulting in the Great Depression. Now, here's where this gets very simply understood. In Texas, you are required to file a proper plat on a land development, on a subdivision, with the county commissioners as a result of the passage of laws and an emergency session of the Texas legislature in 1931. Actually, on the 20th day of May, 1931. The requirement to record land developments in Texas and to record real estate transactions in Texas has been a matter of the statute of frauds for over 10 decades, about 100 years. Now, let's get down to these unrecorded land developments. You're not supposed to sell them using the description of any subdivision of land in any contract of sale. That's the law. Under Article 6626C of Vernon's Texas Civil Codes, Civil Statutes, and under the original enactment in the former Texas Penal Code 1137H. It was a crime to sell land without it being properly recorded and approved and bonded and built to minimum county specifications for roads and drainage and, utilities and things like this. You cannot sell to the public, to the consuming public. You cannot finance through a bank or a savings and loan an unrecorded subdivision property using any contract of sale or any sales contract. But the law enforcement community in Texas has cooked up this interesting exemption for what they refer to as contracts for deed. In other words, you don't have to build your subdivision legal. You don't have to record your subdivisions. You don't have to build them to minimum specifications if you market them by contract for deed, which is a giant load of horse shit. It's total horse shit. It's a lie. It's a great big lie. A contract for deed is any sales contract. All sales contracts are executionary. This idea that you can engage in the commerce of totally illegal land developments as long as you market and finance them with deeds of trust or contracts of sale or some other, executionary contract, as the Texas courts like to call them, is nothing but a stinking low-life lie. It's how they've perpetrated billions of dollars in fraud, and the U.S. Justice Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FDIC, state attorney generals, county attorneys, district attorneys, have all played the stinking rotten little game. Now, I know that sounds, almost innocent, that they can market these subdivision developments that are substandard and dangerous, dirt roads, drainage that doesn't work, sewage and standing water all over the place. These places flood. They even call them Felonies. For the longest time they were calling them Felonies and trying to bullshit the world and tell the world that they only existed along the Mexican border. And it was okay because we're just cheating Mexicans. It's all right that we're committing all kinds of crimes and mail fraud and bank fraud and felonies. When you're swindling people for tens of thousands of dollars and more, these are not low-level misdemeanors. These are felonies. And the state of Texas, John Cornyn and Greg Abbott, the current governor, used to be Attorney General, and Senator Cornyn used to be Attorney General, and Mark White and Jim Maddox and the whole gang, Nelda Luce, Radabow Blair, and County Judge Barb Sadler know exactly what I'm talking about here. These marketing of these land developments is not legal because they're being marketed with contracts for deed. A contract for deed is a form of a sales contract. All sales contracts are executionary. Any contract of sale, that includes all of them, any kind of them, any variation or any form of a sales contract is included in that category of contracts. So to the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, and to the Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Jeff Sessions, who, by the way, this unrecorded land development crap was rampant in Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida. Florida is notorious for this red flag, unrecorded, wildcat, paper, ghost, subdivision development racket as any other state in the country. And to President Donald Trump, you know, this stuff's gone on from California to Alaska to Hawaii. Utah's full of the stuff. Montana, Wyoming, Oregon's horrible for it. California's loaded with it. Nevada, Arizona, Texas. This land swindling, land scheming, bank robbing, savings and loan looting, and the tax revenues of the municipal and county and state governments have been massively robbed by the perpetrators of these land fraud schemes. Now, what does this all mean? Well, you've got this giant real estate based, and I want to point something out here. When it comes to proving the facts, trust me, I can prove the facts. The massive, widespread real estate swindling is at the heart of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's raiding of Mark Stopa's office. And there's been plenty of other people targeted by the government for harassment, false arrest, setting people up on charges that expose this real estate swindling and scheming and scamming. It was done to me. In fact, the FBI decided that I needed my home burnt down and had been flying my home for months with their Britain Defender aircraft. I want the FBI to explain to the world why they were flying my house again and again and again and again with their Waco FLIR plane at treetop level. They came over my house so many times. Former Sheriff Guy Williams, former County Judge Barb Sadler, they come flying over that house with their little Britain Defender about every 2 weeks in '94 and 1995. When I came into the Commissioner's Court, Barb Sadler, and confronted Sheriff Williams about them dropping flares all over my home. You know, trying to burn my house down like they burnt down the Davidians in Waco. And trust me, folks, that fire was started by the federal agents. End of story. They lie, they cheat, they steal, and they murder to cover up massive financial crimes for the political elite in the United States. And all the while we're being distracted by that slob, just degenerate Stormy Daniels and all this fake dossier garbage, and Jimmy Comey and Robert Mueller and this whole dog and pony show that's swirling in the toilet bowl around Donald Trump. While the Clintons and the Bushes walk off into the sunset with billions of dollars stuffed in their pockets and covering up their massive weapons trafficking operations. From Houston, Texas. They were running Charlie Wilson's War and Iran-Contra from the 26th floor of the Houstonian estates. And there's not an FBI agent in this country that can change those historical facts. There's not an assistant U.S. attorney, a U.S. senator, or a congressman, or a CIA agent that can change those historical facts. This giant looting of the U.S. banking system is the largest crime spree in the history of mankind. And it's all directly traceable to campaign donations to the Clintons, massive campaign donations to the Bushes, from Jebby to Neil Bush to George Sr. and W, Shrub, George W. Bush, and George H. Bush. Big H. Poppy Bush is smack dab caught in the middle of this with James Baker III, Bill and Hillary Clinton, and Joanna Herring King, right there in Houston. And I got a few witnesses. I want to mention a couple of witnesses here. That would be former Assistant U.S. Attorney Henry Onken, Houston, Texas. Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Woods. And a whole litany of judicial officers and legislators and newspapers. The news media in Texas are massively involved and complicit in the cover-up of these gargantuan real estate schemes. Now to end this one, because I know I'm getting a little bit long, and my chest is acting up today. The bottom line here is hundreds of billions and trillions have been robbed out of the national banking system. Everybody knows that now. And at the epicenter of all this looting and robbery, these crimes, these felonies, are fake documents, mortgage electronic registration system, Federal Reserve banks, the Postmaster General of the United States, Postal Inspection, U.S. Treasury, IRS, Securities and Exchange Commission, Federal Housing Finance Administration, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, and it just goes on and on and on. HUD, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the whole pile of them are at the heart of all these real estate schemes and real estate scams. It's all real estate centered. They've robbed the American banking system yet again. Yet again, Christopher Wray. Yet again, Jeff Sessions and Mr. Mike Pence and Mr. Donald Trump. Yet again, Bill and Hillary Clinton, using real estate schemes and scams just exactly like what the Clintons were involved in Arkansas. And I'm going to have to leave it right there. My old chest is just not cooperating. Hasta la vista. God bless, and you betcha, we're coming back.